Okay, let's make a start. I was about to say good morning, everybody, but I noticed that the big hands moved past 12. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this webinar. This is about introducing you to the development of the local nature recovery strategy for Surrey. My name is Mike. I'm part of a consultancy called Resources for Change, who are supporting the process of developing the strategy. I'd also like to introduce a few other people who are sort of helping us today. So I'm acting as host, and my colleague Nicholas is on technical support. So Nicholas, if you can give us a wave, please. Nicholas is obviously doing all the things like letting you into the webinar, but is also on hand if you've got any technical issues. And please message him through the chat, and he'll do his best to sort out any technical issues you might have if you're not able to hear us properly or something like that. And then my colleague Jim, if you can give us a wave. Jim's helping manage the question and answer sessions that we'll have during this next hour. And I'd also like to introduce the presenters. We have Marissa Heath, who's the Cabinet Person for Environment for Surrey County Council. Thank you for the wave. Lisa Craig Griffin, who's Director of the Surrey Nature Partnership. Adam Brown, who's the lead for the Nature Recovery Strategy. Adam, if you give us a wave, thank you. And Mike Waite from Surrey County Council, Surrey Wildlife Trust. And you'll be hearing from those during the course of the next hour. So I'm just going to show you a couple of slides just to introduce the whole process. So if I can just get those lines. The introductory webinar. The purpose of this webinar is to help you better understand what a nature recovery strategy is, how it's going to be developed in Surrey, and how you can engage with the process. And I should point out that the webinar is about the process of creating the strategy. It's not designed at this stage to capture views on what should be in the strategy. We'll talk about how we're going to do that, and that comes a bit later in the process. The agenda's on the right here. We've got a few opening remarks from Marissa, and then Mike from Surrey Wildlife Trust is going to give a contextual presentation about the state of nature in Surrey, get us off to a good start. Adam's going to talk about what a local nature recovery strategy is and how it's going to work in Surrey. And then Lisa's going to talk about how we're going to give people the opportunity to engage with the process and make sure we capture a wide range of views throughout. So this is a webinar. We've put everybody on mute so we don't get any background noise and everybody can hear very clearly. But we do want to hear your questions. So please use the chat to put in place your questions. And we've got a couple of points during the agenda when we will be going through some of those questions. If we're not able to answer any of those, we will answer them offline and make sure everybody sees the answers provided. So as I said, slides will be shared and questions unanswered questions will be addressed. And Adam will be saying a little bit more about where that will be taking place, the sort of website for the recovery strategy. We are recording today's session because, again, we would like to post that up on the website so people who aren't able to attend can at least sit and listen to the presentations and what goes on in the next hour. So I hope that's clear and everybody feels they're in the right webinar. I'm going to stop sharing and then invite Marissa Heath to say a few words from the County Council's point of view. So Marissa, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for making that so clear. When you said I could do the introductory remarks, you didn't actually give me a time limit on it. I will keep it to a couple of minutes, but actually this is a subject I could talk for hours on. I think this is such an important issue and one that I'm really excited about. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I went to visit the Amber Foundation, which work with young people who are troubled or have difficult backgrounds, and they were on a thing called the Gateway Project opposite Earlswood Lake near Reigate. And this is a piece of land with some allotments on it, which the young people were being led by a very capable lady called Charlotte Kinlow, who some of you may know, and they were working to improve nature and develop skills. And that visit really firmed up my view that nature is the best way to bring our communities back together and to solve many of the issues facing us, including both mental and physical health in Surrey. The young people from the Amber Foundation have faced some really challenging times in their lives, as I just mentioned, but being involved in that nature project was giving them purpose and enabling them to find different ways of working through their individual issues. And the reason I mention this is to put the local nature recovery strategies in the context of where it's going to sit in Surrey's priorities and why it is such an important piece of work. Now, I've been a councillor for about 20 years and I've seen many projects around nature over all those years. It's been by far my favourite part of being a councillor. But in the last few years, we've seen it really grow in importance and people have started to actually talk about the impact we have on nature, which I think is absolutely brilliant. From housing development to airports trying to grow, to increased use of our countryside by walkers, to pollution of our waterways, a really topical issue. It's no surprise that we're living in a nature depleted nation and we need to address this now and prioritise nature, a nature first approach. The requirement for county councils to set local nature recovery strategies is both a brilliant but also really obvious idea in my view. Why we didn't do this decades ago, I don't know. But anyway, it's in front of us now and we're taking the action. And in the general working of the county council, in context, we spend about 70% of our budget on children and adult social services, and the remaining 30% is then tussled over for roads and libraries and community centres, all of that kind of stuff. So it could be that local nature recovery strategies become a minor piece of work that sit on the shelf, but we're not going to let that happen. Absolutely not. Nature is central to this term we have got around Surrey that's called No One Left Behind. And Surrey needs to be a county bursting with nature as far as I'm concerned. The drive towards doing that and achieving that will solve many of our other problems through social green prescribing, as I mentioned, to deal with mental and physical health, through projects I described before, dealing with troubled young people and people who've been involved in the juvenile systems in crime and things like that, getting them out of that, through cleaner water, through cleaner air, and through pollinators spreading their beauty across this county and making it an even more beautiful place to live. So this is going to be a really active strategy is what I'm saying basically, and it's one that genuinely needs the input of everyone on this call. We will reflect your asks and your efforts in this. It's not just a listening shop here, it's an active talking shop, and we need people to give us their views so we can turn that talk into action and make it really come through. We've employed 5 ecologists to help us, but we do need the wider expertise that many of the residents have in Surrey. And collectively, I think our ambition has got to be making this county's local nature recovery strategy the leading one, the exemplar that everyone wants to copy. So I'm really ambitious about this. And I also think that we can use it to tackle a subject that I'm really passionate about, which is water pollution. They stand to me as key issues around nature recovery, the biodiversity and water. So that's something that we're seeing increasing problems with in Surrey. So we need to tackle that. I'm really grateful for everyone turning up. I wasn't expecting so many people on the call. I think it's great. We've got other calls and other sessions lined up as well. And I hope we'll continue to get this action. And please, send your views in by email if you don't get a chance to make them within this hour. I will stop there. As I said, I could talk endlessly, Mike, about nature recovery because it's so vast, the different directions we can go in this, but this isn't about me talking. I just wanted to introduce it to say basically it is a priority for Surrey. It isn't something that will just sit as a dormant strategy, and it is something that I will make sure stands up as a key piece of work in this county. Thanks so much, Mike.
Thank you very much, Marissa. And thank you for keeping that brief. It's got us off to a very good start. I'd now like to introduce Mike Wade from Surrey Wildlife Trust. Mike's has been responsible for the State of Nature report in the county, and we've asked him to sort of set the context, why nature recovery is important and what the opportunities might be. So over to you, Mike.
Right, yes, thank you everybody. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Marissa, for that brilliant introduction there. I'm Mike Wade. My day job being Director of Research and Monitoring at the Surrey Wildlife Trust, but I'm also the present chair of the Surrey Nature Partnerships Biodiversity Working Group. And I'm going to tell you about the state of Surrey's nature in just 10 minutes. So Surrey, a veritable promised land, blessed with more woodland than any other English county, 13% of the UK's remaining lowland heathland. The beautiful Surrey Hills Protected Landscape, formerly known as the Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, and much more besides. Surrey's natural environment is arguably pivotal to its socio-economic attraction and unique selling proposition. But there's trouble in paradise. For the past half century, and especially in the past decade, as evidenced by these national state of nature reports, most recently last year, we have been constantly lamenting ongoing declines in wildlife and lost biodiversity as measured by the diminishing diversity and abundance of species. The Surrey Nature Partnership wanted to get more of a handle on this for the context of Surrey, so we published our own State of Nature in 2017. Why did we see a need for this? Well, as I say, clearly to provide a local context for the UK State of Nature reports, but also to serve wider biodiversity, nature recovery, advocacy opportunities to help prioritise our wildlife conservation strategy, and as a baseline for future reviews, because we plan to repeat this in 2027. So in brief, from a sample of 4,242 native Surrey species, we estimated that just under 12% were most likely already locally extinct, with a further 21% at various degrees of threat in our county. The National State of Nature report of 2016 estimated 2% national extinction, which shows how much more acute this is when looking at smaller regions, albeit in our case, from a particularly diverse one to start with. And this shows how the sample breaks down by wildlife grouping: plants and fungi, invertebrates, by far the largest, and vertebrates, including our most familiar wildlife: birds, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. How did we define local extinction? Well, by no species records for over 30 years, as indicating probably extinct, for over 50 years, presumed as definitely extinct, and for over 100 years, clearly long gone. And these are some of the species we've lost from Surrey, with the dates of their last sighting. We see here the pine martin, last seen in 1934, the lady orchid in 1959, the mole cricket 1962, and more recently, the Duke of Burgundy fritillary, a lovely little butterfly, in 1987, and really recently, the water vole down the bottom there in 2008. But Surrey remains a very biodiverse county, despite these losses, and it is partly because of this intrinsic richness that the universally applying root causes of these losses have been felt so acutely here. This table is from the report and shows the proportion of the British native lists of various wildlife groups that is or was represented in Surrey. So 60% of our native British flora, 81% of butterflies, 78% of bees, ants, and wasps, all the reptiles and amphibians, and 94% of mammals. Why so rich? Well, despite not having a coastline, this is totally down to a relatively high complexity in habitat types, which in turn is a result of our biogeography midway across the southeast, and the underlying highly contrasting geology, which from this slide you can see is also amazingly complex. But many of these species are now only just about clinging on. We've got the curlew and the wood white butterfly there. Here are some examples of species that now only occur in a single site, sometimes within a few square meters in the case of the narrow-leaved helleborine, a wonderful native orchid on the left. But such is the state of wildlife now in the UK, like us, many counties support the only remaining UK populations, as reduced from a former much wider range. In Surrey, this seems to involve mostly spiders and beetles, partly because of our large, though much reduced percentage of remaining lowland heathland. There's the lynx spider there at the top and the shining pot beetle top right. On the flip side, we're also seeing some welcome range expansions. The firecrest was a rare breeding bird in the UK, but in some parts of Surrey, it's now locally common. The wasp spider was formerly confined to the central south coast of England around the Solent, but since the millennium has spread right across the southern counties and now up as far as the Midlands. Most of this dynamism is driven by climate change, however. So why does nature matter? State of nature matter? Well, it does present a barometer on the overall health of the natural environment, on which we're all dependent for our health and well-being and the continuity of our present lifestyles and behaviour. Our natural environment is rapidly changing, ever more frequent extreme weather resulting from climate change being responsible for increasing regularity of flooding events and wildfires. Well, okay, but do we really need all this biodiversity to provide stability to the natural environment? Well, the simple answer is yes. because a less complex ecosystem is far more vulnerable to collapse. It is the fundamental complexity that supplies the resilience. But also, I finally want to show you how biodiversity relates to bioabundance. As it is the overall abundance, i.e. the sheer weight of essential biomass, that actually drive the ecological functioning of our planet. So just see how losses in biodiversity are symptomatic of the overall reduction in bioabundance. There we go. So that should be explanatory. So if you remember a headline finding from the State of Surrey's Nature, that around 12% of our native biodiversity is estimated to have been lost. Well, for that degree of loss in this albeit highly mottled equilateral triangle of a study area, we're looking at almost a quarter of total lost bioabundance. It's only very indicative, of course, totally indicative, but it just shows you. All that lost stored carbon, soil fertility, waste decomposition, and nutrient recycling, oxygen generation, cross-pollination, the list goes on. So nature-based solutions are the future, and one very good reason to reverse biodiversity losses and begin nature's recovery. And this can involve the reintroduction of certain keystone species, i.e. those that punch above their weight as the primary drivers of their ecosystems, like the beaver, as part of the solution of the natural flood management solution to ever worsening climate change impacts, like flash flooding. So, very brief, very rapid, but that's the State of Surrey's Nature, and that's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. That's given us a brilliant start to our presentations today. You've set out very neatly the current state of Surrey's nature. Nature recovery strategies is a way of sort of taking that forward and thinking about a way that how that might look in the future. So I now want to bring in Adam, who's going to talk about what a local nature recovery strategy is and what that might look like in Surrey. So Adam, over to you. And just to say, we will be doing a Q&A after Adam's presentation. So please leave any questions you have for either Adam or Mike in the chat.
Adam Brown, I'm the local nature recovery strategy lead for Surrey Nature Recovery, and I'll just be spending the next 10 minutes talking about the sort of national context for local nature recovery strategies and where they came from, what a local nature recovery strategy actually is, and what Surrey Nature Recovery is. So national context, there's a lot of text on this screen, but that is, yes, the Environment Act, and following that, the Environment Improvement Plan has set out a lot of legally binding targets. And then the sort of peak target that has got the most headlines was set out at sort of the International Biodiversity Summit, which is 30 by 30. And that commits us to protecting a minimum of 30% of land and sea for biodiversity by 2030. It's an extremely ambitious target when we consider that we're only at about 8.5% at the moment. And so we've got a lot to do over the next 6 years. But then more specifically for targets, we've got biodiversity on land. There is a national target in England to restore 500,000 hectares of wildlife-rich habitat outside of protected sites by 2042. So we will be getting a sort of guidance target for what we need to deliver in Surrey to help the country get towards that 500,000 hectare target. And yeah, the list goes on and on. There are a multitude of targets we'll be considering and trying to meet. These do then also go into species. So there is a big headline target for halting the decline in species abundance by the end of 2030. So what Mike was just talking about there is a genuine legal commitment for us as a country to try and bend the curve on that nature loss. And then once we've bent that curve, getting it back up and increasing by 2042. And then additionally, focusing on those species that are most at risk of extinction and trying to avoid any more extinctions. So the generic term that seems to is put about at a national level is the Nature Recovery Network, and this was something that the Wildlife Trust as an institution did propose several years ago, and luckily was picked up by the government. And this is sort of the context that yeah, that every single bit of nature across the country does work in a sort of cohesive network, and all sort of adds its own individual benefits to nature. So on this particular, I like this tube map because it does include everything from sort of local wildlife sites to school grounds, and old railway sidings. So it really does bring to light all the different opportunities that are available to us. So in terms of how we actually deliver that nature recovery network, the proposal is local nature recovery strategies. So these are the sort of the building blocks that will collectively come together to deliver that national national network. So Surrey is one of 48 local nature recovery strategies that will be created across England. They are designed to be locally led. So the Surrey County Council was nominated as a responsible authority last year. And although we are leading it, we are working amongst all of the partners. As you'll see on today's webinar, we've got the Nature Partnership, Surrey Wildlife Trust as our core partners. And yes, one of the core principles is that they are to be delivered from broad engagement with multiple stakeholders, and they need to consider delivery of wider environmental benefits. So those nature-based solutions that Mike was just talking about at the end of his talk should underpin the consideration of where we put nature recovery. We've got some core principles for our development, that is transparency. So ensuring that we can show how partner contributions have been considered and how decisions have been made. So when we produce that final map, everyone has confidence that it does truly represent everyone's views where possible. Inclusivity, we do need to enable everyone with an interest in nature recovery to be involved wherever possible. And Lisa will be talking about that later on in her talk. And then clear communication, and this is something that I think we're already struggling with, is ensuring that the language that we use is not exclusionary and that we can make sure that it is available to everyone. And that's, I think, quite different difficult in an industry that's been quite, I think, insular in terms of the environment. And so, yes, if I do have any acronyms that are legacy acronyms in this presentation, then do type them in the chat and I will explain what they are. So local nature recovery strategies, what actually are they? They are a spatial or mapped strategy, so that will identify locations to create or improve habitat, most likely to provide the greatest benefit for nature and the wider environment. So at its core, we begin by mapping the most valuable existing areas for nature, and that will be published soon. And then the engagement process, through the engagement process, we'll agree priorities for nature's recovery. And then the final product will be a map or spatial plan that will have specific proposals for creating or improving habitat for nature. And it's all expressed in this lovely flowchart, which I have open every day. But I will just go through it all a bit more in a very paint-led iterative approach of what this actually means. So our first step, as I said, is mapping what we already have. So first we take our core national designations. So these are those lovely acronyms there: special areas of conservation, special protected areas, special sites of scientific interest, and national nature reserves. So they are all the sort of top tier wildlife designations that we have across the country. So we pull them into our map. Then we have our local designations, and those are local nature reserves and local wildlife sites, or called sites of nature conservation importance in Surrey. And then finally, we are to map irreplaceable habitats as defined by a government list, which will be going out to consultation later this year. But most importantly for Surrey includes ancient woodland. So that would be our step one. We will end up with a nice base map of the existing areas for nature that we have. So the next part that we will do is work out what outcomes we actually want for nature recovery. And so we'll be reviewing pre-existing strategies and policies. So for example, that might be the National Landscape Management Plan for the Surrey Hills. So it will be a nice big area. And then we'll have a National Pollinator Corridor, or beelines, that some of you may have heard of. Then we'll have potentially a neighbourhood biodiversity plan. And then we'll go into the stakeholder engagement and asking people what they really want, and we'll express these on the map in various ways. And as you can see, we end up with a big old mess of competing priorities and outcomes that will either be from those legacy strategies or from the stakeholder engagement. So we go back to what we've already got, and we look at how we prioritize all of those competing actions and wants and needs for nature recovery. And we'll do this by looking at a couple of key different principles. So we'll be looking at the delivery of key benefits for nature recovery. Marissa earlier in her talk said something which has really resonated, in that this is a nature first strategy. This is nature's voice, and so we need to make sure that, although we consider everything as much as possible, when we come down to it, this is for the benefit of nature's recovery. So second prioritization will be obviously looking at the delivery of the stakeholder priorities that will come out of the next couple of months of engagement. We'll be looking at how nature recovery in Surrey can contribute to those national environment objectives that I outlined a minute ago, considering how they can deliver wider environmental benefits, and then also considering where it's actually deliverable. So we'll be talking to landowners and land managers over the next few months as well about, you know, their interest and wants to actually deliver nature recovery across the county. So yes, the likelihood is we'll end up with much more targeted areas for the creation of new habitat. So here you can see we'd be connecting up particular areas. And then also we'll be looking at that sort of classic connecting corridors. So once we have all of those things synthesized and prioritized, this is sort of more likely a slightly cleaner map of what it might look like in the future. Obviously completely the demonstration map on paint. So I think for those of us who've been around for a while, it's what is different this time. I think we've done this before in certain circumstances, but actually there's a lot that's different this time. So we do have the biodiversity opportunity areas, and they have been well adopted in Surrey and well used in Surrey. Many of them feature in our local plans, and they do have a good consideration in the planning process. However, they had no statutory underpinning. They were just adopted as policies within a local plan. So local nature recovery strategies are a requirement under the Environment Act of 2021. They aren't a policy, and they would require a change in legislation in order to be dropped. Equally, following the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill amendments, strategic development, minerals and waste, neighbourhood and local plans must all take account of the local nature recovery strategy in their creation. So that gives it another level of importance that didn't exist before. And also, there is direct relation to funding mechanisms which didn't exist with previous plans. So the key one that exists at the moment is biodiversity net gain, which is another policy that came out of the Environment Improvement Plan, the Environment Act, and essentially requires any development that is undertaken to achieve a 10% net gain in biodiversity. If they deliver that biodiversity net gain within the local nature recovery strategy, they get a 15% uplift in the amount of units that they can deliver. So it allows us to target particularly where that biodiversity net gain will be delivered. But beyond that, we'll also be looking at how the government are looking at how they can target all of their various funding streams. Following the EIP, they've set up a whole plethora of different ones, including sort of climate funds and farming and protected landscape funds and all sorts. And so they'll be using the local nature recovery strategies as a way to target that funding more effectively.
2 minutes left, Adam.
Perfect. I think that's about spot on. So who are we? Surrey Nature Recovery. You would have seen this nice logo going all the way through the presentation. We, as I said, Surrey County Council are the responsible authority for delivering the local nature recovery strategy, but we are very much delivering it in partnership. So we have a steering group which features all of those people listed there. So Surrey Nature Partnership, the arm's length government bodies, so Natural England, Environment Agency and Forestry Commission, and then also Surrey Wildlife Trust and the Surrey Biodiversity Information Centre, but also some representations from land managers from the NFU and CLA, but also the Hampton Estate, who aren't listed there actually. And then aside that, we have a supporting authorities group. So this is all of the districts and boroughs and Natural England that feature within Surrey form part of that supporting authorities group. And under the legislation, they do get a right of refusal for the local nature recovery strategy. So we'll be working with them over the next 8 months as we develop it to ensure that it aligns with the sort of principles and policies that they have, and that doesn't happen. So in terms of how we actually deliver it, I am the Surrey Nature Recovery Lead, and I'm employed by Surrey County Council. And so it is my great privilege really to be delivering the first local nature recovery strategy. And then I am supported by 3 technical working groups. So we have the stakeholder engagement and design group who put on this webinar today, and that is being led by Lisa in the Surrey Nature Partnership. The data and mapping technical group, who will be doing all of that sort of spatial prioritization and producing those final maps, and that's led by myself. And then aside all of that is the species technical group, who will be specifically looking at the priorities and needs of our species of conservation concern, and that is being led by Mike Waite at Surrey Wildlife Trust. And so that is all of us. So just quickly, how we funded, all of the LNRS funding is from a specific funding pot from DEFRA. So it is not taken from county council funding. So nothing is being diverted from any of the work of the county council that Marissa was talking about earlier. It is a specific funding pot to deliver local nature recovery strategies. So very quickly, when is all of this happening? We are hoping to publish by next summer 2025. Here there is a sort of a whole host of engagement that we're hoping to do over the summer, which Lisa will go into further in a second. And there will be a formal public consultation on the draft strategy early next year. And yes, that's largely it. Thank you very much.
Right, we're going to, Jim, we want to sort of tackle some of the questions that people have been raising throughout those presentations. We've got about 7-8 minutes to do that. What the questions that we can't answer, we will answer offline and put those up on the website so people can see, everybody can see the answers to the questions. But Jim, if you'd like to just share the first question with us, and then we can either direct that to Adam or Mike.
So I've got about 7 questions about the actual nature recovery aspects, and then a few questions about the engagement, but we'll let Lisa's presentation happen before we get onto the engagement questions.
Yes.
So just the first question we got was quite a specific one about grass verges, and it was, will Surrey County Council turn grass verges into wildflower areas like Rotherham Council has done? Up the north.
Adam, do you want to tackle that one?
Yes, definitely. I think, yes, everyone appreciates how important that sort of linear connectivity is in terms of supporting nature recovery, and it will be a sort of key consideration when we look at where we focus. There are a couple of different projects already underway. I think someone already mentioned the Blue Heart Verges, and so we'll be looking at how we sort of integrate the work that's already been going on under Blue Heart Verges into the local nature recovery strategy. But we also do have a series of conservation verges, and so these are ones that have been specifically identified for their importance for nature, and so we'll be looking at or making sure that they are included within our sort of areas for importance for biodiversity, and then looking at more broadly how we might expand that, but that will fall under the purview of the local sites partnership, who are responsible for supporting and designating local wildlife sites. Mike, I don't know if you had any other thoughts on that.
No.
Okay, we'll move on to the next one as time is pressing.
Perfect.
So how do we expand our thinking from focus on already notable and protected sites and species towards recognizing and implementing the much greater nature improvement potential on ordinary sites, which are otherwise being lost to development of breakneck seas? So it's about how we do nature improvement on ordinary sites.
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, I think then the LNRS actually has a much higher focus. So although our first stage is about mapping all what we already have, the actual actions and deliverables, when we look at the regulations, very much focus on the areas outside of that. So how can we expand them? How can we improve areas outside that and improve connectivity? So it's a bit of it's an interesting one, because not all of our sites, although in Surrey actually we are doing very well compared to the rest of the country, our designated sites are doing okay compared to a lot of England. We will have some need to continue to conserve, obviously, and improve our protected sites, but the actual actions and measures, as the regulations are written, very much do focus on those areas outside of those traditional designated sites already.
Thank you. Next question.
Okay, so these two are about biodiversity net gain. So how does the nature recovery strategy link to biodiversity net gain, which has to be delivered on almost all new planning applications? And who will be monitoring the biodiversity net gain allegedly being provided by a developer?
So I think we can possibly post a fuller answer to the monitoring and regulation of biodiversity net gain after this, but in terms of how we consider it in the local nature recovery strategy, I did touch on it briefly. So in the metric, when we consider the units of delivery of biodiversity net gain, when it's calculated, there is a particular modifier called strategic significance. And so if an area of delivery falls inside the local nature recovery strategy, you apply that modifier. So there is a direct link between biodiversity net gain and local nature recovery strategies once they are published.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mike, is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, only that, yeah, so there are mechanisms, because net gain was introduced in the Environment Act as well as alongside local nature recovery strategies. They work very much in partnership, and there are these mechanisms, as Adam said, to drive off-site net gain projects into the the areas identified in the LNRS.
Thank you. Jim, we have time for 2 more questions.
Okay, so someone's asked about biodiversity opportunity areas and how these have been selectively ignored by Guildford Borough Council's planners. Sorry, Guildford. Will the new corridors be formally respected, or will there be scope for them to also be ignored by Guildford or any other borough council?
Being new to Surrey, I do have the great benefit of saying I don't know much about that historic relationship, but what I can say is that the local nature recovery strategy isn't a designatory process. It is very much an expression of what we could do for nature recovery. It's not an expression of what we should do. So just because a piece of land is notified within the local nature recovery strategy, it doesn't add any new protection. What it is very much a point of focus for us as a community and as a funding entity for delivering local nature recovery strategy. So it wouldn't prevent that. It would make it less desirable, I think, but it won't actively prevent it.
Yeah, I mean, it'll add weighting to material considerations in the development management process.
Okay, and one last question, Mike. Yeah.
Yes, please do.
So this is quite a lovely one. Nature is not aware of county borders. The natural corridors Adam referred to will clearly need to extend into other areas. What mechanisms are planned to coordinate efforts where needed? An obvious example is the Surrey Hills ANB is close to but doesn't abut the High Weald AONB, or National Landscape as they're now called, perhaps would be a good candidate for such a corridor. Quite a complex question, but a goodie.
No, that's absolutely brilliant question. And yes, as a community of responsible authorities, we have a lot of facilitated discussions. So I'm in constant contact with colleagues in Hampshire, Sussex, Kent, and Greater London as well. And so throughout that process, we'll be looking at those opportunities. They're already talking to Hampshire about that sort of Heathland corridor that comes up through that southwest in the Wilden Heath area, and then also before our plans go to formal publication, they are also shared with all of our neighbouring responsible authorities. So we'll be considering where there are those sort of county boundary opportunities as well. So it's very much part of the consideration when we are creating the plan.
Okay, thank you. Right, we'd like to move us on now to, there's been quite a few questions about how people are going to get engaged in the process, and we're going to talk to the different groups out there. So Lisa, I think that tees you up very nicely to talk about engaging people.
It does, thank you. Let's see if I can share my screen. As has been said, I'm Lisa Craig-Griffin. I'm the director of Surrey Nature Partnership, and we are very keen on getting people engaged in this whole process. Mainly, and obvious reasons really, we want to engage stakeholders early on, so I'll go through a particular process that we're looking at, as well as talking about the other communications that we've got planned, because we're really keen to get people so engaged in this that they take on helping us with the delivery. Because to be honest, as we've talked about a strategy, there's no point in us devising a strategy which then is not delivered. So it's really important that we do get people involved as early as we can. And that is everybody. And we have actually been told both by DEFRA and Natural England that we should engage everybody who's interested. Now, I think realistically, it's not going to be possible to engage absolutely everybody in perhaps the way they want to be engaged, but we will try and see if we can make this work. So what we've got is a whole series of things planned. Initially, we've established, as Adam mentioned, we've established a design group, and that design group has a key people from a number of different areas to help us to make sure, one, that whatever communications we put out go to the right areas, goes to the right people, to make sure that the engagement process that we're going through actually engages a really good cross-section of people. Just to give you an indication, that design group has got on it, it's only got 8 people at the moment. We're not looking for it to be too big because otherwise it becomes unmanageable. But we've got representatives from nature conservation, the landowning community, community liaison, biodiversity, responsible authority, that's Surrey County Council, local planning authorities, Natural England, and obviously Resources for Change, who are actually going to manage the themed conversations, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Sorry, I'm just trying to move something. Right. So what we've got planned are the introductory webinars. You're here, so you know that. Themed conversations and area conservations, which I'll come back to in a minute. We're offering to come to any existing network meetings, so that's obviously quite an easy way for us to get to various groups across the county and talk you through what we're doing and get your views and opinions. I put a very small selection on there because the slide wasn't big enough to put all the ones there are in Surrey. But just to give you a feel for, so we're looking at obviously landowners because they're quite key, community groups, biodiversity working group, which we've got. I noticed a question actually in the chat about parish councils, and yes, parish councils will be involved in both our themed conversations, and we're quite happy to come along to particularly groups of parish councils where you meet together rather than try and go to every individual one, because there are a lot of parish councils in Surrey and we're a very small group. There's an online survey which will come up on the Commonplace site, which the County Council are developing. It should be ready by the end of this week. We've got our fingers crossed on that one. But what we will do, in fact Adam has promised to do, is to send out to everybody here that's online on both of our webinars, the contact so you can get straight into the Commonplace site. We've also got some interactive events planned for families in September. September will be towards the sort of end of the first phase of engagement. We thought that'd be a really good way of getting families involved. And obviously we're proposing to do possibly other webinars, certainly updates online and newsletter articles, and really, again, going back to you as individuals, if you're involved in a particular group and you think it'd be quite nice to have something in your newsletter, then please do contact us. Right, themed conversations, which I've talked about. We thought very hard about this and decided that it'd be really good to have people involved in what we're calling deliberative conversations, which means that you actually get a number of themes and you're asked to talk specifically about nature and how nature revolves in that theme. I will come on to more details in a minute. These will involve 25 to 30 people at each of 7 themed workshops, which will go on between May to July. We are very shortly, that's the Nature Partnership, going to be sending out invitations to some of these. The reason that there'll be invitations initially is that we're trying to make sure we get a really good cross-section of people. It's based upon some work that was done as one of the LNRS Local Nature Recovery Strategy pilots. And if we can get a really good cross-section, then we should be able to get quite a good in-depth discussion between these 25 to 30 people. If you make it any bigger, it obviously makes it very difficult to get that information. That is not to say that anybody that isn't initially invited can't put their name forward, and I'll come back to that again also at the end. And then in September, this will all be brought together. The outcome comes from each of these workshops with an influence, the priorities for our local nature recovery strategy and the actions that we want to use to achieve them. Right, in a bit more detail, these opportunities to get involved in conversations about nature, how to recover nature, what are the priorities for action in Surrey, and what are the actions that are needed. And as I've just mentioned, a good cross-section, so I don't really need to repeat that, but really it is to make sure that we get a good conversation going. These will be facilitated conversations, so that we'll be on hand some expertise at each of those conversations on nature, the local nature recovery strategy, Surrey nature recovery, and the Surrey landscape, plus professional facilitation, which is coming from Resources for Change. We're hosting our webinar today. We have, as I said, 7, and for those that can count, I know there are 6 on there, I'll tell you one. We've got 7 workshops planned. The reason that there are 6 themes is that we're going to repeat the farmers, growers and foresters one. This is partly because they are quite instrumental in managing some of the land across the county. We want to make sure that they are really engaged in this process. So we're putting on 2, one not quite other side of the county, but they're in different parts of the county. The next group that we're looking at is non-farming businesses that own land. And there's one obvious one actually missing from that list, and that is the developers. And I know we've got some representation from developers actually on this webinar. So that's where we want to bring together those that are basically own land for golf courses, theme parks, utilities, large parts of large businesses, NHS, hotels, company HQs, landscape gardens. I mean, we've got a plethora of those across the county. And in fact, from a land point of view, farmers, growers and foresters, who are really important, don't own the majority of the land. So there is still this large area of land which we need to cover. Obviously, we want the community. It's important that we have a community voice. Parish council reps, countryside management partnerships, community leaders. Please, if you think that we've missed some out from there, this is a shortened version of the list, I might add. We have much longer lists to send invitations out to. Then let me know. I'll be interested to know who else you think should be there. People and nature. This is a voice of people who bring individuals and communities together for nature and well-being. Because although our focus for the local nature recovery strategy is specifically on nature, which is right, nature first, we're also looking for secondary benefits, other benefits that will come along, and health and well-being, I think, is one of those really crucial ones. We've got a group looking at landscape and habitat. This is those working on specific habitats and landscapes. This will include people like the High Weald National Landscape, which just comes into the county, the Surrey Hills National Landscape, and those that know Heathland Connections and anything else in that sort of area. And then young people, and this will be the last one of actually all of them, looking at the voice of 16 to 30-year-olds, really because we want to make sure we get that voice to the next generation, and it's quite a difficult group to engage. We've got some engagement actually coming through community, which is on the school side, but we were hoping that we get some young people to that one. The theme conversations, then, we've talked about the size of the groups. You'll be split into smaller groups on the day, just so that those that are interested know what we're talking about. Split into smaller groups, probably about 5 or 6 on a table for these conversations. Locations are across the county, so we're going from Merriswood, around the Dorking area, and our furthest east is Lingfield. Generally, they're going to be from 10 until 3, so we are looking at in-person meetings for a fair chunk of the day, with farmers, growers, foresters, and the young people, the ones being in the evening, because we felt that was probably a better time to attract that group. What the conversations are going to cover, so they're going to cover the outcomes for nature recovery in Surrey, what that particular group
2 minutes left, Lisa.
Oh, sorry, I'll speed up. Sorry. What that group thinks they should be covering, actions that need to be taken to recover nature, actions already being taken and how they could be scaled up. So I'm aware that there are a lot of groups out there already doing a lot of work on the ground. We'd like to get you involved as well. Additional environmental benefits, this, as I was mentioning earlier, so the health and well-being, reducing pollution, carbon capture, pollinators, etc., and what the challenges are likely to be. Then what will happen next is the outputs of the conversation will be reviewed by the design group. That's a small group of people that I've mentioned earlier. There'll be further 3 area conversations, which will be bigger. These will probably be around 70 people, 50 to 70 in September. They will bring this together on an area basis. Our areas are based around the district and borough council admin areas, so east, west, north. Those that are interested in what that actually means, that's roughly, well, the east is Reigate and Banstead, Tandridge, Mole Valley, Epsom and Ewell, west Waverley, Guildford, Surrey Heath, Woking, and north Elmbridge, Spelthorne and Runnymede. And we will also bring in more representation from those areas because those are a bigger conversation, so we'll have the opportunity to bring in more people. Right, I have reached the end of my bit. I'm going to say go to the Commonplace site. It's not quite up, but it will be, and register that you want to get involved. In the interim, if you're really keen to have your name put forward, do by all means go back to Zoe Williams, who I think you will have seen her name on the Eventbrite invites to this event. signing up for the themed conversations. Let me know if you really feel that that's for you and you'd like to be involved. You can express an interest. I will say we're still going to look for a good representation across the county and for various, I suppose, coming from various different aspects of each of those themes. So I can't guarantee everybody will get a place, but we will see what numbers look like. Come to our interactive events when they're posted, and please invite us to one of your group meetings. Thank you. That's all I have to say for the moment.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, we have 5 minutes left for questions. So, Jim, have we got questions specifically relating to Lisa's presentation?
Do quite a few. So some of those preceded the presentation. So some of the answers were actually in the presentation. So
Okay.
I'll try not to repeat those. For instance, maybe this one isn't quite covered. So how do you plan to include smaller conservation groups in developing the strategy?
Right, that smaller conservation groups to a certain extent will be some will come to the community meetings. That was the plan, but also I'm quite happy to come. We're quite happy to come out to meetings of some of the smaller conservation groups, preferably if they could bring together a group within their area. That would help both Adam and I. We can come and talk to those groups then, and talk about how they might like to get more involved and find out more about what's going on. I think this is also an opportunity for us to help us to bring together everything that's going on across the county. And the plan on Commonplace is to have an interactive map, which will allow people to actually have a look at what's going on. And I don't know whether it actually allows you to put information on. Adam can answer that one. But Adam, will it allow people to actually? He's nodding. Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. That's what I want to know. Yeah. So you will be able to add on information about what you're doing in your area onto that map, and that will start to give us a much bigger picture of what's going on. So that was a long answer.
Thank you. Next question, please, Jim.
So there were lots of suggestions that groups that need to be involved, education establishments, primary schools, etc., even Duke of Edinburgh Award children doing those awards. So we'll just take those on board as comments or suggestions and respond to those as best we can. But there's a specific one about local authorities here. Who within local authorities will sit on the supporting authorities group? Officers, councillors, or both?
That's one for Adam, who may not know the answer to that, but
it's officers at the moment. So it is primarily biodiversity officers where they do exist, and then planning policy officers where they don't. But yes, we will be communicating better with councillors as well into the future.
And there was another question: will developers and land agents be involved in this process, especially those with experience of delivering biodiversity net gain?
Absolutely is the answer to that. Yes, developers and land agents, etc., advisors certainly will have some representation on those themed conversations. And again, happy to go out if they have any particular groups which we can go to and talk to them. And such as a developers forum or similar. Yeah.
And then another one was education establishments. I think I've mentioned primary and secondary schools are also important. We have Blackwell Farm, University of Surrey, and Merriswood College in Walperston, both important landowners. Will they be involved?
Yes.
Short answer. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, they will.
So I think those are most of the ones on engagement. So shall I just go back to some of the more sort of environmental style questions? So here we go. Will there be consultation with Highways England about green bridges? Obviously, these are expensive infrastructure projects, but countries such as the Netherlands, US and France are ahead of the UK in this regard.
Yes, definitely. So there's already been a presentation from Highways England and the railways to all of the responsible authorities. And so they, within their own strategies, are considering LNRSs. And so we have been asked to provide 5 key sites or strategic crossings, which would be our sort of ideal locations for where the current infrastructure is sort of severing connectivity across the county. So we'll be working on that over the next month. And yes, so very much so. But as you say, they've asked for 5 from each RA, so that's 48 times 5. So we've got a lot there that they'd have on their wish list.
Perhaps
Can I
one
just
last-
add? Can I just add? No, Mike. Yeah, I mean, Surrey vernacular does feature a lot of infrastructure fragmentation by roads, because you know the M25, M23, all those motorways and things. And of course, we do have a green bridge going in to connect up Ockham and Wisley Commons imminently in the next couple of years.
Okay, thanks for that, Mike. And then
Time for one more, Jim.
Okay, so this one's partially been answered. How is agricultural use included in the strategy? So I think we talked about involving farmers and landowners. But one following up on that is, what about gardens, especially large ones, some of which will be on chalk or heathland, for example? What about gardens?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, just to reiterate on that agriculture bit, there's like nothing gets delivered without land managers included into this. So they're very much part of this process. And then equally gardens. So yes, the map itself will have really specific locations mapped for measures, but what we will have alongside that is much more generic sort of aerial focuses. So say for particularly the southwest of the county, there's obviously a big focus there on heathland, and so we'll be providing sort of guidance and measures for that entire area on what sort of activity you could take on a private level to help with that sort of localized habitat. So maybe planting heather within your garden and landscapes and that sort of thing. So although there'll be very specific measures, we will also have sort of the entire county covered by sort of more generic measures that everyone can take to help contribute towards nature recovery.
Thank you. I think that's all we've got time for, folks.
Yep, thank you very much. I'd like to draw this to a close. We said we'd finish prompt at 1. This has really been the launch of the local nature recovery strategy for Surrey process. I hope we've put in front of you the reasons why it's taken place, what it's going to look like, and how you can get involved. So the last thing I'd like to say is I hope we see you again, because there is a great opportunity to get involved in this process, and we want as many people to get involved as they can. So thank you for coming along today, and look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.